Okay, thank you everyone for joining us today. Welcome to Humentum's Operationalizing Locally Led Development 2023. Our topic today is NGO leaders, the impact of operating models. I have a couple of quick slides to go through before I hand it over to our moderator, who will introduce today's speaker. First, a big thank you to our industry partners. Their support and expertise help make Humentum's work possible. I would like to remind everyone that we will continue to host webinars to support our members and their work. And here are a few of our upcoming events, including webinars and roundtables. I will share a link to the upcoming events in the chat. And then a few housekeeping notes. All attendees are currently muted. To ask questions, please feel free to type in the chat box. You can access the chat box by clicking on the chat bubble at the bottom of the screen. Questions will be kept until the end unless it clarifies something like an acronym or if the presenters or the moderator feels comfortable pulling it into the discussion. So feel free to engage with us throughout the session and we'll do our best to address your questions. Subtitles are available for this event. And to turn them on or off, please click on caption or live transcription on your Zoom toolbar, then show or hide based on your preference. And then this webinar will be recorded, and a recording along with additional materials will be emailed later this week. Check your spam folder if you do not receive it. With that, I am very excited to introduce and hand over to the session to our moderator, Kim Kucinskas, who is the Director, Community Strategy at Humentum. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Thank you, everybody. You're all very welcome. It's lovely to be here today. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Some of you may be familiar with the series that Humentum has been putting on for the last 18 months, and some of you may be new. So what Humentum is we are increasingly part of this movement for more equitable development. And so what we do is we bridge the gap between the strategy and the action and how we make operational changes for a more equitable, a more resilient, and a more accountable sector. And this locally led development series is part of that work. You can find more resources about what we do and how we are doing it on our website here. I'll put it in the chat. We released a recent report on data on how NGOs are facing this change. And later in the month, we will be releasing a new report on NNGO voices. So please stay tuned for that. If you are interested in this series, you can find us again here next month on July 12th. For a session called Models to Transform Risk and Compliance, where we will be discussing a more locally led vision for risk and compliance. And we'll be hearing from NGOs, from NNGOs, and from funders about practical models for how we share risk with both local and with national NGOs. And so last year, this series was all about the talk of locally led development. This year, the series is all about the walk and really learning from others about how they're implementing the changes that we want to see. So the title of today's webinar is The Impact of Operating Models. And really today what we're going to be doing is we'll be hearing from 3 leaders of NNGOs on the relationship between their organization's operating models and change. And there's a lot of talk these days about what is locally led and how to do locally driven development. But for me, the big question is, how do we get there? Not necessarily what it looks like, but how do we get there? And so today, what I want to do is tackle the question from the perspective of operating models. I want to hear from our panel what their thoughts are, and most importantly, their experiences about the impact that investing in how we do the work in those operating models can have on a national organization's ability and bandwidth to lead the change that many of us know is necessary. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and get started. Helen, if you could spotlight our panel, I'm going to actually turn it over to you all and have you introduce yourself, because I think that you know best what perspective you bring. So if you could introduce yourself, your name, where you're from, and the perspective that you bring to this conversation, because I really would like to have this as a conversation between the four of us about operating models and locally led development. So Gertrude, do you want to go ahead and get started? I see your, Gertrude, I see you're speaking, but I cannot hear you.
Still?
Oh, there you are.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me now? Okay, so thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kim. My name is Gertrude Kabwazi, and first of all, I'm a development practitioner. 30 years I've been in the development sector, working for different organizations, both local and international. So I'm currently an executive director for Yamba, Malawi, and a local NGO. So I'm happy to join in this forum and learning, but also excited to share. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Who'd like to go next?
Let me step in.
Please.
So thank you, Kim, and it's a hello to everyone out there. My name is Wadzanayi Vere, and I've been working within the grassroots movement building area and side of work in the development sector. And it's been 26 years working, mobilizing communities right within the grassroots throughout Zimbabwe. So I've worked in 40 of the 60 districts in Zimbabwe. And I'm the outgoing, I'm transitioning. I've been head of Self-Help Development Foundation of Zimbabwe. I've been the executive director for a while, for over 10 years plus. And I'm stepping into a new role, and as a country coordinator of Just Associates. I'm looking forward to sharing my experiences from grassroots movement building, and and to learn also from everyone else. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Kim. Hi, everyone.
Welcome.
Yeah, so my name is Dzikamai Bere. I am a human rights activist based in Zimbabwe. I work with an organization called the Zimbabwe Human Rights Association, short ZimRights. ZimRights is Zimbabwe's first post-independence indigenous human rights advocacy group. It's a grassroots movement of about 250,000 members, ordinary people, that was formed some 30 years ago in 1992, officially registered as a PVO, private voluntary organization, in 1993. And over the years, our work is simple to express. We campaign for human rights as a mass movement. We say we bring citizen power to the human rights discourse in Zimbabwe.
Thank you all. So I'm excited to hear from you. I'm going to go ahead and get us started with a topic that I've been thinking quite a lot about in the last number of weeks. I think we'll start with the concept of locally led development, which is what this series is all about. But recently, what I've been doing in some of the different sessions that I've been doing at Humentum is experimenting with the idea of virtual time travel. So please bear with me for just a moment. The question that I have for you is, if you think forward to 30 years into the future, what is your vision for what equitable development would look like 30 years from now? So that's one side, looking ahead 30 years from now. And then on the other side, on a more immediate time horizon, for you, what does equitable development that is locally driven look like for you? What does success look like in a more immediate term? So what's your hopes for the far future? And then what do you think is practical and what it should look like, locally led development or locally driven development now? And I'm happy to wait, or I'll go ahead and call on you. Wadzanayi, please go ahead and start.
Okay, Kim, thanks. So yeah, traveling into the future, I like dreaming, and it's nice to think that far. For me, equitable development in the future really means and speaks to us coming to a point where what we are calling currently the beneficiaries of development efforts and initiatives are not at that end of, you know, of the continuum of being seen as beneficiaries, but are they themselves the initiators of programs, of actions, and are the ones who are driving development processes. Allow me to hasten and comment that currently development is, you know, we've on one hand development actors who are different, you know, NNGOs, INGOs, governments and the like, and then we have the beneficiaries on the other hand, and it's this binary, this two-sidedness that I think has to over the years come together and somehow integrate, and we come to a point where if I'm, you know, the current beneficiary 2023, 2053, 2063, I'm the one who is determining what's the development trajectory of my area, of my community, of you know, of my society, of my country, and we are taking actions, and we are now engaging with others to enable us to achieve that intention. So yeah, leaving space for my colleagues. This is how I see things in the future. I don't know if you want me to speak to the other question now, or I.
Please do. Yeah. So what do you think? What for you right now, what does locally driven development look like today or in the next year or two?
Yes, so bringing it to the now and our current situation, locally driven development for me is a genuine engagement of communities, you know, where it's not we are coming and bringing this program, we're bringing this project into the community, you know, but we were sitting down with them and picking up initiatives from them. I've had the opportunity of having experiences where some of the programs we ran were literally, you know, work that we found women doing in some rural community, and we think, oh wow, this is great, let's take it, this is what we're going to upscale and share it with other communities who may not have thought of those initiatives. So for me, it is starting off at that and starting to transform the you know, there should be a power shift in terms of the dynamics, in terms of who is determining what, who is saying what. If we are talking of consulting, what's the kind of consultations that we're having? To what extent are we allowing our communities in? And unfortunately, because of the current state of things, communities are not open themselves to come out and say, okay, no, we want it done this way, and we think this is what is more, this is top priority for us. And they also reserved, and they'll hold back and they'll wait to hear from us. Okay, so what are you saying? Okay, we'll take it. So it's moving ourselves as practitioners, it's moving the communities themselves to a point where we can all sit at par and speak and take up ideas and begin to implement them, regardless of who exactly has put in the idea for going forward. So yeah, I think I'll stop there, Kim.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Agree, disagree?
Yeah, agreeing, but also adding on to what she has said. For me, the equitable development in the immediate, in the near future and in the long-term future, I would really like to see more development that has no isms, like more has dealt with a lot of issues around isms, that is more responsive, but also that is not using the bushfire kind of mechanism where we just doing like dressing here and there, fire, and then you disappear, and you still people still remain poor and struggling with issues. More grounded, most importantly, more self-driven and self-sufficient. Yeah. So, because and again, in the immediate future, like now, in the shortest term, I would like to see more proximate leaders in the space, in the development sector. What I mean by the proximate leaders is the local leaders themselves, because they do understand the issues better than the other people. Not saying the other people cannot do a good job, but I mean, like, let's see more people from the local setup championing the agenda more, because this is our story. Let us be in the driving seat. Let us be the drivers. But also, I would like to see more increased awareness on these issues. Yeah, because sometimes these things are perpetuated by lack of knowledge and lack of understanding how these things are layered, how these things are structured, and how they're acting as barriers in equitable development. So if we have more people engaging in these conversations and more awareness around them, and then we also have more people engaging in this agenda. So, but also I would like to see behavior change, attitudes and behaviors change, and also practices. Yeah, all along that behavior change framework, we have to see all those changes. But I would also like to see changes in the funding opportunities, the way they are structured, how funding is done, starting from where they are initiated, what goes into the funding frameworks, and again, how that the frameworks, how are they used and how are they implemented, and so on and so forth. And lastly, I would like to see more structured effort around addressing all these issues, because we've talked about locally led development, but I think most of the times it's more emotionalism. Like, we tend to talk more, but to structure it in such a way that it has impact and it's traceable, it's measurable, and holding people accountable. I think that is like, it's there, but we can do much better than that. So I'd like to see a future where we have more accountability, more transparency, but also more responsiveness around these things. So that's the future I would really like to see around the issues of locally led, shifting the power, decolonization, and all that.
Yes, thank you. And Dzikamai, what you tell me, what is your vision for, what's your vision? What does success look like 30 years from now?
Yeah. First, I do agree with my colleagues. I like the word that Gertrude has introduced us to, emotionalism. In other places, I've been chastised. It's a foreign language, but we have been accused many times from our perspective of human rights of sentimentalism, and I think that associates with what Gertrude is saying. I think she's inviting us basically to get down to the real concrete issues when it comes to locally led development, going beyond slogans. And for me, from the perspective of ZimRights, for us, what locally led development would mean, what we want to see 30 years is a society in which local communities actively lead in creating and sustaining a culture of human rights. So I add the word locally before communities there, because there are many communities out there. And we, as ZimRights, we really acknowledge the power of the people who are closest to the challenges that we are dealing with. Many times, and I think over the years, when the human rights discourse is preached, our focus is mainly on the outcome, the ultimate reality that we're trying to create. But for us, it's not enough to have a culture of human rights. it is very important that that culture is created through the active leadership of the local communities. We as human rights activists don't wish to simply end up in a house that we do not know how it was built, no matter how beautiful it is. We want our blood and our sweat to be in it. And when that is the case, we know we will be able to deploy even more blood and more sweat to defend that reality. So for us, that's what we wish to see, communities coming together and leading in creating that society that we all dream of.
Thank you. Thank you, all three of you. So what I'm hearing from you is a vision where I'm hearing active leadership, I'm hearing self-driven, I'm hearing this idea of we move away from binary relationships to where people come together to have the conversations closest to where the problems are and find the best solutions, but that there is active leadership on the part of communities in what the problems are and in what the needs are. And I think we hear these words quite a bit in different forms and in different conversations. And yet, I think what all of you said is, okay, now let's stop talking about it. How do we move from talking the talk to walking the walk? And so what I want to hear from you is, in order for that to happen, what needs to change now? And Gertrude, you mentioned a few really practical things, but what are the barriers for you as leaders of national NGOs? What needs to change now and who needs to do the changing?
Okay. What needs to change? First of all, it's the mindset. Yeah, mindset change is critical. In all this agenda, I think the mindset change is key, among other key pieces. Because I mean, both from the us, like in local NGOs, local players, and those people who are like around us and supporting the work that we do. All of us must change. Us, we must change and also understand the power that we have, because sometimes this comes from the power that we look down upon ourselves, and we believe or we think we can't do anything without being led by somebody outside. And again, sometimes even when given the opportunity to lead, we also maybe feel like we have the power. We have the power. Even when we talk about shifting the power, sometimes I'm like thinking, should we be talking about shifting the power or strengthening the power? Because this assumes that the locals do not have the power. We have the power. It's just that it needs to be strengthened. It needs to be, amplified. It needs to be magnified. So the mindset needs to change from the local perspective. On the part of the other players, the mindset also needs to change around the same things, understanding that we do indeed have the power and we have the capacity as well to champion our own cause, but also to deliver our own results in the best way that we see that it's going to transform the landscape, the people that we serve, and again, also craft our own agendas, deliver those agendas in the best way that we see fit, according to the needs that we have identified. Apart from that, we also need to look at systems. They need to change. These frameworks that we have used forever, like at the beginning where, the development work started, many years ago, they have just changed names. They keep on changing names, but the frameworks are the same. Many years we've seen how one concept comes, and then years later, you hear that there's a different concept. But when you look deeper, when you peel the onion, you find that it's the same thing, just coming in a different way. So now we are challenging for a change that is more looking at accommodating and creating an enabling environment, a conducive environment for that locally led development, for that equitable development. Because these frameworks, the ones that we have used for so many years, they have kind of not achieved to give us the results that we want. So if we want to change the approach, it means the systems also must change to accommodate that. The mechanisms, the ideologies, the concepts, all that, we need to review all that. We can't change one corner in the house. We can't just sweep or fix one cabin in the ship. We have to reorganize the whole ship for it to be effective on the waters. So we really need to look through holistically, what do we want, how do we want to do our work? So that's from my perspective. We really need all that in full perspective.
Yep. Mindset shifts, systems change, not just shifting the power, but actually strengthening the power that currently exists. What else?
Yeah, from my perspective, yeah, I do agree with Gertrude. Well, a few things come to mind when we speak about what must change. I can only reflect on the story of ZimRights, which has been doing grassroots mobilization for the past 30 years. In 2021, we launched a new strategy, the Shifting Power to the People strategy, ZimRights Reset. What did we seek to change? So there were quite a number of problems that we were trying to deal with. One is I don't know how to say this politely, the struggle is not very courteous. One is the elite capture of people movements. The founders of ZimRights built a robust movement of 250,000 members over 3 decades, and ZimRights became the go-to organization when it became to mass mobilization. Most of the human rights groups that emerged in post-independent Zimbabwe were founded upon the foundation of ZimRights activism. So it became a very attractive institution if you wanted to do, for example, election mobilization. So it became very attractive to donors. But with that came the poison, the chalice, where what is supposed to be a mass movement starts attracting a lot of money from donors, money that is tied to government foreign policies. And the operating structure of ZimRights is that while it is a social movement, it does have a secretariat that runs the programmatic aspects of the organization. But the secretariat is supposed to serve the membership, which is the movement itself. But once donors will love to see glossy reports come in and a lot of money starts going to the secretariat, it means over time, the secretariat becomes more powerful than the membership. And with time, it loses the disconnect with the communities that I was talking about. And the end result for that is what you then have, which is a top-down approach to development, to human rights work. So in 2021, when we said we want to shift the power, that is one area that we were targeting. And for us to be able to do that, first, there is need for the acknowledgement that power has been traditionally deployed at the decimation of human communities to weaken them. And that has led to elite capture. And when I speak about elite capture, I'm not only speaking about authoritarian governments like the government of Zimbabwe that tries to infiltrate NGOs, but I'm also speaking about good-willed donors who have got goodwill, who genuinely wish to invest their funds into development. But then they end up their funds leading to the elite capture and the creation of what I now call white-collar civil society. A civil society that is totally disconnected from the people power that Gertrude spoke about. And in thinking that we are helping the communities, we are probably disempowering them. At a time where communities need to confront their leaders and demand a reduction in school fees, they probably think that maybe they need a lawyer to go through this section and that section. And before you know it, you are a resident in the space of a captured judiciary that is unable to deliver justice to the communities. And communities that have surrendered their people power have lost it and they find it difficult to emerge from there. So that's one aspect. And the second aspect for it, for me, is a paradigm shift from a top to bottom approach that I have mentioned, perspective on development that is casting citizens as passive recipients of rights that are handed down by the elite. And when I speak of the elite, I speak of both authoritarian governments or the state, but I also speak of even good-willed human rights groups, development partners who still believe that they've got sufficient power and sufficient money and sufficient intellectualism to hand over the solution right from the top. And the third aspect of it is the acknowledgement that human rights are a liberation struggle. We need to adopt a people-centered approach, a struggle approach to development. And what does the struggle approach to development say? It says that our rights, they originate and are ultimately guaranteed by legitimate resistance. The moment we lose touch with that, with our legitimate resistance, we lose the plot. And I think that's what I need to see shift.
So it's really interesting the way that you put that, and I want to pull on a few of those threads, and then I want to get all of your opinions as well on this, because what I'm hearing from you is power is connected to money, it's connected to decision making, it's connected to control. And so those things, while you're couching them in the terms of, you know, human rights, which is right, also relates to the operations, right? How we do the work, how the systems are and the structures and the mechanisms unfold, because that's kind of we roll up and we roll down into the programs and how we do the work. One thing that I've, have been frankly struggling with is, Gertrude, you mentioned that, the systems haven't changed in quite a while. There's a concept in systems change theory called engineering resilience, where it's like, if you imagine an engineer building a bridge, they build that bridge to be resilient, as in it will sway in the wind, but it will always come back to center. And in some ways, I think the development sector has had that kind of resilience, where it has swayed over the decades, but it always kind of goes back to the center. And that can sometimes be a positive thing, and it can sometimes be a challenge when we are trying to change the system. So my question to you is, as we go through this, my question is around how we start to make these changes, how we start to make these shifts, and to get to that 30-year vision you all started the conversation with. Not to get to an incremental change, but to get to that 30-year vision where there is active leadership by communities, et cetera, where there is real kind of shifting of power or strengthening of existing power. What are your thoughts on the tension between, in the short term, local and national organizations maintaining the status quo of this system, but getting more resources, getting more decision-making authority to both survive and to thrive, versus that deep transformation of the political and funding ecosystem? How do we kind of manage that tension between I need to keep paying my staff and the lights on and working within the power structure, but also we don't want to just kind of become a mini NNGO, if you will, and kind of we want deeper transformation? How are you all managing or thinking about that tension? I apologize for the long-winded question, but I think I'm pulling on that thread of power and money and how we make these changes. Wadzanayi, do you want to start?
Okay, thanks, Kim. And yeah, how do we manage that those tensions and those creative tensions, trying to recreate our work and recreate and redirect the way we're working. So for me, picking it up where Dzikamai left it, centering our work and around people, for me, that would be one point of departure and taking off, where before we get into what methodologies, what frameworks, and what this and that we're going to do, is number one, our work really has to focus on the person and the person as a person. And once we begin to be alive to the person, to the humanness of the person, it will shift the way and the approach we're going to start to deal with things. I say so, having been steeped in grassroots movement building work, where if you look at the person and you focus your work on that person, the way you then arrange everything else around them and trying to improve their lives is structured differently. And how then, as an institution, do you start to refocus and to recenter your work, at the same time continuing your day-to-day? There is need for us, I think, within the whole sector to have an understanding. And I'm speaking of national NGOs, I'm speaking of international NGOs, I'm speaking of governments and all that, of the need to then say, the direction that we're going, is it going to sustain us? For the social investor, how long can we continue in doing what we're doing, investing in this way? And is that sustainable on its own? And once we start to relook the whole system, it's generating within us a commitment to then say, okay, let's continue, continue like on a maintenance basis, what's happening, but at the same time, taking a pause as we continue. It's like a going and stopping at both at the same time, but saying, okay, how are we doing the work that we're doing? And are we delivering our programs in the best way possible? And is this way going to change mindsets, like Gertrude was speaking about? Is it going to shift power, or is it going to transform power? Is it going to strengthen power? And start to have those internal discussions within institutions, across institutions, across nations, and then say to ourselves, okay, how do we have to get there? So it's really this stopping and going at the same time, and relooking and introspecting the way we work. Having worked within a national NGO, and trying, as you move in, trying to re-strategize and refocus and also do your day-to-day work, it calls on partners who are willing to understand and who are willing to invest in that relook in yourselves. So for the social partners, for the social investor, there has to be a commitment to then say, okay, what we're doing now may not necessarily be the thing we need to be doing 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line. And even as we continue to do what we're doing, how do we still recalibrate ourselves for the future? So we'll need to be able to understand each other, to commit time, to commit resources, to commit energies, to relook that process and to re-strategize. Failure, save for having commitment of time, money, and energies, and minds. We may either just continue doing what we're doing and and just end at a brick wall, or total collapse, or our capacity to create and to be creative as the environment is shifting, as things are changing, as needs are shifting, can then be curtailed. So yeah, let me leave space for the others.
Thank you. I love that image of both. It's like dual tracks of let's be realists and practical and maintain the status quo where we need to, but then also introspection, recalibration, re-strategization, which requires commitment and investment. And that, I think, is the key, right? We need, in order to create that space. Any other, yeah, please, Gertrude.
Well, thank you, Wadzanayi. Yes, building on that, I think this change must be very intentional. Like when you look at the status quo and the change that we desire, we should treat this as any other work that we do. Good planning, it must be well thought through, well structured. One of the things that you have to do prudently, you have to do risk analysis. What will happen here and how do I mitigate that? It has to be a well-planned thing. Otherwise, sometimes even as soldiers in this army, we really need to go prepared. We really need to go to the war in courts, prepared. You can't just go and start up fighting without knowing how you enter the other enemy's territory and stuff. You really need good preparation because we have many times, to my starting words, dealt with the issues more with our hearts, but we also need to balance the heart and the head in terms of how do we plan everything that is structured, that is more responsive, that is not jeopardizing the very same work or disadvantaging the very same people that we are trying to bring to light. So hence the issue of structuredness, hence the issue of how do we get it, it's supposed to be work that is well thought through in short, so that we don't necessarily find ourselves on one hand that we don't have the money that we need to do the work that we do. At the same time, it's also one of the things that has held us in the same position for many years, the fear of losing the hand that is feeding us. I think that's where a lot of organizations have not ventured in this agenda. They have feared to say, if we venture into this and our donor hears this, or they feel like we are fighting them, then therefore they're going to stop funding us, or they're going to stop providing us with resource. We also must understand that this is not about them versus us. It's not like that. It's us together, but how can we be together when there are some imbalances in the space? That's what we're trying to deal with here.
Yeah, that's a great point. And what I'm hearing from you is this balance of almost the art and the science, as you said, the head and the heart of how we do this process. And I think fear that you raise is a really important one. And I think that permeates, that's both national and international NGOs, I think, that are facing that fear. Yeah.
Yeah, I do agree with my colleagues, what Gertrude is saying, the fear of losing the hand that is feeding us. It's true, most true. I mean, when we are picking this from an African perspective, knowing that the struggle for development is a continuation of Africa's liberation agenda. And many times when this conversation is ahead, we are on the wrong side of the table, so to say. So that fear, I think we need to overcome that fear and come to a time where we then have a frank and honest conversation. But back to your question, Kim, on bridging that tension, I've got just a few remarks. One, I think, is commitment to deep listening. Many times we throw these buzzwords and slogans, but there isn't, paying attention to the actual heartbeat. In Zimbabwe, we've got a proverb which loosely translated, yes, I see Wadzanayi smiling here. She probably knows the proverb that I'm going to throw. It's called chinoziva ivu kuti mwana wembeva anorwara. Kim and Gertrude and colleagues in the audience, I may try to translate this. I think there is an English version of it which says the warmth of a rock is known by a lizard. The warmth of a rock is known by a lizard. But the actual direct translation isn't speaking about any warmth. It's actually speaking about, the tragic story of war, of poverty, that the people who are closest to these problems are the ones who probably have got the keys to the solution. And unless we commit to deep listening as development workers, as activists, as funding partners, it will be difficult to bridge that tension. And the other one is, of course, prioritizing the local voices and perspectives. Prioritizing the local voices and perspectives. I was listening some time ago to a presentation by Pan-Africanist Brian Kagoro, who was speaking about how many times we have de-intellectualized Africa. And each time we think we need a solution to a problem, we parachute in a research company from the West to come and develop the next 5-year strategy. Each time the African Union wants to do a reform agenda, they bring in some expert. And unless if these experts are coming from those universities, unless they're coming from Harvard, from Cambridge, we don't trust them, even we ourselves as the locals. So we need to decolonize that part of it. And the perfect way to do that is to prioritize the local voices, the local perspectives, and create our own local intellectuals and pay attention to them. So this directly relates to the deep learning aspect. The other aspects, I think my colleagues have covered that, but I saw something very interesting in the chat box, which I thought I should, link with. It's mainstreaming flexibility and adaptability in funding. And I think development partners need to ask themselves, whatever approaches we are using, are we building sustainability or dependability? And that's a question that comes each time a donor tells me that, oh, we're only providing project funding. By the way, we don't provide institutional funding. At the moment that language starts coming out, and I mean, with all due respect, I know my colleagues will simply be doing their work, but it goes back to a design that does not mainstream flexibility and adaptability of funding. And I think if we pay attention to some of these things, we will be able to bridge that tension.
Thank you all for that. I think that's starting to cut through some of the slogans and the jargon into the reality of what needs to happen, both from the head and from the heart. So thank you for that. I would love to transition into, I feel like we're halfway through this conversation and I want to hear your stories. And so what I'm hoping to do is hear a little bit about your experiences and your personal stories and how they inform this discussion. I think some of it has already come out, but about the importance and the impact specifically of operating models on locally led development. And by operating models, I mean how you do the work, how your organization is structured, where you get the funding, how you do your staffing, all of those kind of the details of how an organization operates. Can you tell your stories about how that has impacted or has the ability to impact locally led or locally driven development? In your stories, what has your experience been in leading operating model changes or in organizational transformation? I'm interested to kind of open it up and see what you think others on the call would be interested in hearing, but that connection between your experience in managing operational change or just the day-to-day struggles and how that impacts locally driven development. Whoever gets to the mic first gets to start. Gertrude, you win.
Thank you. I can start by sharing the Yamba Malawi story and my own experience in this locally led, power shift and stuff. Yamba Malawi originally was registered in the US and it was being, managed from the US for the longest period of time, up until somewhere it was started in 2006. So somewhere around 2016, 2017, That's where the management and the leadership started reflecting. They took an inward looking, step towards like reviewing and rethinking how best can they make the work that we do more meaningful on the ground. And one of the things that they looked at was the issue of leadership. Why they started asking themselves, why are we still continuing to do the work from here instead of having somebody who is on the ground? So somewhere around 2019, that's when the organization had their first country director, and I joined in the organization at that time as the first country director. But still, the conversations and the executive director was based in the US, in the New York office, and still making most of the decisions there. So as we continued having conversations, we're continuing to have inward conversations. And one of the things that we looked at was issues of systems, issues of our philosophies and all that. So we said, yes, it's enough to kind of talk about these things, but that's not completely what is going to help us transform the organization to the way that we want it to be. So what do? We need to be structured in our effort. We need a more structured effort, something that is going to help us follow through so that we address these issues, whether it be the use of systems and other philosophies and stuff. So we started the decolonization process. We termed it decolonization as a concept from 2020. That's when we started the decolonization agenda within the organization. And how did we do that? We started by engaging consultants. We said, yes, we have intentions, but sometimes you don't know how do you ground these intentions to make it more practical and making more tangible in terms of like results. So we engaged the consultant to help us sort of structure our thoughts and again, help us to how do we move forward. So out of those conversations, it was clear that it wasn't going to be just having the country director in Malawi, but it needed much more than that. Where are the decisions being made? Where is the money? And who is doing what? So after that, that's when we started we also went into co-leadership model. We started implementing a co-leadership model. Instead of having the executive director in the UK, in the US, and having a country director, both of us were not co-executive directors, and we shared kind of equal powers. But still, there was still like that imbalance still because of imagine a change that had just been instituted. The mechanisms and the systems, somehow they were still playing in the background with the same frameworks. So we needed to continue to change those governing structures. So then we have continued to engage consultants up until 2021, 2022. When the executive director resigned, the decision was made that now it's going to be shifted completely to go to Malawi. And I became the executive director in 2021, shifting the power. And also we had our first local board instituted in Malawi. We were registered in 2020, 2021 in Malawi, so that all things, as I said, we needed to change the systems, we needed to change the frameworks as well. So all those things we started like shifting, we started making those changes. But also we started saying, as long as the money also comes from where it comes from, we are going to continue to be dictated, we are going to continue to have these issues. How can we then tap into the local funding? Yeah, because we need to do fundraising locally. We need to get the money locally. So we started looking for opportunities, funding opportunities within Malawi, not just within Malawi, but from our own government. How can you support us as organizations that are doing this work? So for the first time, we are being supported this year. We have launched a project, a 2-year project that is being financed through government, Ministry of Finance. So this is some of the changes that we have instituted. Not only that, we have had sessions with the consultants. One of the sessions that we've had is to orient members of staff. Remember, we said as long as people don't know or don't identify these challenges, they may have problems to engage in this agenda. So we said we needed to orient our boards both the US one and the Malawi one. What is it? What's decolonization? Why are we doing it? Where are they placed in this agenda? So they had an orientation, and then we came down to the members of staff. They also needed to understand what is this that we are championing here? What are some of the issues that they're experiencing around all these issues? Yeah. So we had conversations. We went into open conversations, very open and frank and honest conversations about all things that are happening inside our organization that could be barriers to equitable development. So through these processes, one thing that we have been, some of the things that we have been interested to do, we have been interested to map issues and our areas of focus. What is it that we need to do in this work, in the workplace as Yamba, to transform the space in such a way that it's indeed promoting locally led development? And secondly, identify the possible levers of systems change. What are the levers of systems change? And then design and develop the conceptual approaches which are going to help us frame our thinking, but also help us to do the work that we want to do. So we are in the process of doing that. We are going to have a baseline done very soon, because we also need, as I said, we want to be very intentional. We want to be more structured. We just don't want a shotgun approach, but we want to be very intentional so that over a period of time, we know it's a long-term project, but we want to measure ourselves. From here, what have we done? What has changed? What needs to continue to be paid attention to? What needs to be what effort do we need to place where? Where are the pressure points and all that and all that? But we have also engaged other players in the sector. We have engaged Tilitonse Foundation. Tilitonse Foundation is a consortium. It's a foundation which supports locally led development. It's a local funding agency. So they have been championing shifting of the power. We have been engaging them, having conversations, but also collaborating. We have also talked to Opportunity International. Opportunity International is also one of the organizations that's interested in this agenda, as well as Rays of Hope. It's a local organization. All those players, we are saying, let's get together and have these conversations so that all of us, we can structure this and come up with something that is more solid, that is more tangible, and that is bringing in the result that we want. But we have also we've been having conversations with our own funders. Yeah, we share our funders what we are doing. We don't want to scare them. We don't want them to feel like, oh, we need them. But they must understand that it's not just in the interest of Yamba Malawi. The benefit is also all around, even them, because if it's locally led and it's producing more result and more impact, then all of us have the wins. So we needed to also have conversations with our funders. Some of them, they didn't even know about this agenda and they like it because we engaged them. The others had already started having this agenda, championing this agenda, and they also truly supported us to continue with this agenda. So yeah, that's what we've done so far, but we've seen that decolonization is one of the concepts that we are trying to use to address the issues within the organization, but also how we structure the work that we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And tell me, so from the start, when the start of that journey and to now, how many years did that take? Did that all this shifting take?
We started the solid structured work started in 2020. So 2020, 2021 and 2022, about 3.5 years.
3.5 years. Okay. And it sounds like it's a kind of a wheel of the mindset shift drove the systems change and the operations change, and then the operations change further drove the mindset shifts. And so it's kind of this cycle.
Yes.
Thank you for that. And I'm seeing some things in the comments. For those who are listening, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will pick them up. But I want to hear more about your story. So Wadzanayi, would you like to share, where do you come from? What is your experience?
Thank you, Kim. So my experiences, I've been with Self-Help Development Foundation for the past 26 years, but the organization itself started way back 1963. And the focus then, the core focus was mobilizing communities and women in particular to save money. And the work grew, you know, before during our colonial period, and then after our independence, and to a point where the savings concept ended up being a development concept, a development methodology that every other NGO is now working on when working with. And it's glad to see it evolve. For us, we came to a point, I think 1996, 95, 96, where our membership of women were organized in groups of 10, were saving money weekly, had grown from just a handful in 1963 to 250,000 across the country. But allow me to speak to maybe a slightly different angle from what Gertrude spoke to, so that just to bring in a different perspective in terms of institutional journeys. For us as an organization, going through the processes in terms of us being able to create and recreate ourselves and continue to be relevant and to speak to the needs of our communities. One thing that happened before independence, we were not funded by any funder to speak of, and operations ran on goodwill. Operations ran because they were locally based, and in terms of costs, where it was literally women within the community coming together and just walk, and you meet under the tree and you talk and you organize yourself. So there's a lot of self-organization, self-mobilization that was happening. Crossing into after independence, that was 1980 for Zimbabwe. We actually started to get donor support, and I think the longest we had with funding support was like 30 years with one particular funder. And upon reflection of that support during from 1980 to about 2000, part of our target as an institution was to acquire property, physical land and buildings. And the target then was that Zimbabwe is split up into 10 provinces, was then to say in each and every of these provinces, we need to have a property of our own. And the basis of that property was that so that the women we're working with can find somewhere to come to physically and learn together at that point. And it was also going to have its own spill-on effects. And that was done and achieved, So by the time we got to 2000, we had these properties across the country. And thereafter, I think things for us as a nation on a macro level started to take a shift and a twist and a turn. We had also started programming and we were running a microfinance program that was very, very vibrant by 2000. And the intention had been, we want to support the work that we're doing from our own resources. So instead of us going out and looking for funding and all that, let's generate our own income and support our own social mission. And the interest income earned from the microfinance entity was to be directed to that. But lo and behold, in the Zimbabwe story, a few years down the line, that didn't materialize, and things went south due to hyperinflationary conditions in the country. We still driven by this desire to be able to finance and resource our own mission ourselves. We then went back to the drawing board, and from the properties that we had, we also lost some along the way to meet up with challenges that were there. The issue and the discussion was then we need to then increase our return from these the land and the buildings that we have, and how best can we do that? And that demanded a level of investment that was now beyond what was our own internal capacity, and demanded us to then look outside ourselves. And this journey got us engaged in a lot with private sector, in trying to see how best can we partner, how can we, have either a joint venture or a build, operate, transfer model, and see what would work in the current situation to support our mission. It's something that we are still currently working on. Our dynamics keep shifting, and we need to keep looking at it. I've tried to pull out this side of our story in particular, so that there's a lot to do with resourcing our operations, and unless that area of resourcing is answered in a direct and particular way, it's difficult for institutions to hold on to their missions and to get to where they want to go. And if your resourcing is determined by someone else, then yeah, you'll definitely have to dance to their tune. It's been quite a journey, and yeah, we could share more. I want to give space for another story from Dzikamai.
Thank you. And yet your story comes out loud and clear, which is, if there's not sustainable or the longevity of funding, then how much of, as a leader, was your time and attention being spent to think about diversification of funds and where you're finding the funds versus programmatic impact, the work that you're supposed to be doing, and in today's environment, the ability of national NGOs to lead the change towards being a more locally driven sector versus having that come more as a top-down conversation to you, because you're spending so much time thinking about the finances and the money. And I think that point that you bring out is well received and well heard. Dzikamai, can you share your experience and your story? And I know that there's a side conversation around funding, in particularly in Zimbabwe. If that is relevant, please feel free to bring it in.
Yes, yeah. Before I get on to talk about my story, just to congratulate Wadzanayi and Gertrude. I think they have shared what I think are very important models. The journey that Gertrude has walked in Malawi there is very inspiring, I think, for many activists across the continent. But I particularly, am impressed by the fact that they were able to ensure that there is even government funding for the kind of work that they do. So there's a side conversation around that where Namatai is saying in Zimbabwe it wouldn't work. And that's very true. There is a report that I just shared. Congratulations to the Civil Institute, led by my brother Tendai Murisa. They have launched that very important resource, the ease of doing philanthropy in Southern Africa. And Malawi happens to top that index with a score of 3.8. And I think that's something quite commendable, and something that, African governments need to learn, that, opening civic space is opening up more partners to invest in local development. Active citizenship is not a threat to development. Citizens need an opportunity to partner the government in advancing development. So I thought I should just highlight that. But coming back to my own story, so I did introduce myself as an activist, but my journey as an activist does start in the courtroom. From 2005, I was working as a magistrate in Bulawayo, in Zimbabwe. And quite a number of cases that I did interact with did trigger the activist in me. One case was the case of a juvenile who had to be sent into detention, particularly because the police who arrested her didn't know she was juvenile until she was in court. And now she needed to be detained for the sake of care, but the place of care was as bad as the place of castration, of punishment, where you send ordinary criminals and then your young ones find themselves there. The second case was the case of mental health, where again, the police arrested a mental health patient and charged her with a criminal offense. And then it turns out during trial that she was a patient of the mind. And according to the Mental Health Act at that time, she was supposed to be put in detention for purposes of mental examination. And again, the place of detention was just as bad as the place of punishment. And from there, I then became an activist for judicial reform, ended up leaving the judiciary in 2008, joining civil society in 2009, where I started doing human rights work at the Zimbabwe Human Rights NGO Forum. And I spent 10 years with that institution and ultimately moving to ZimRights in 2000. And from 2000, the challenges that we are discussing here today did bedevil ZimRights. Particularly, I did mention the issue of the disconnect between the Secretariat and the movement, and bringing in the role of funding partners in shaping the programming and human rights agenda. In 2018, about 3 or 4 frontline organizations that were doing elections work were closed overnight because some of the donors had gone into bed with government. Remember, that was the time just after the military coup in Zimbabwe, and some had been fooled that some things have changed, but things never change. But then it then exposed the hypocrisy sometimes that you find in what I call elite civil society, where people certainly develop that disconnect with the grassroots. So the work that we have been doing since the launch of our Shifting Power to the People strategy in 2021 has been one to say, how do we rebuild a relationship with stakeholders, especially funding partners, that leads to equal and mutual benefit. Equal and mutual benefit. Now, the phrase equal and mutual benefit comes from Johan Galton, speaking about conflict transformation, saying conflict is in a relationship and not in an individual. And he says, for us to fix that, one of the fault lines that we need to bridge is inequality. And we bridge that by creating relationships that are based on equal and mutual benefit. So that has been part of the work. We've been having, conversations with ZimRights funding partners, trying to build a coalition of funding partners who understand ZimRights as a movement. Now, here I will want to unpack the structure of ZimRights as a movement so that you understand where the conflicts and the fault lines emerge from. So ZimRights is a grassroots movement. Ordinary people coming together, 250,000 of them. In 1992, they were much, much less than that. And they decided that we want a people's own movement to fight, for human rights. So they put together a constitution which governs how they are going to do that. But over a period of time, they then realized that for you to be able to do human rights work, you need funding, you need to write all these complicated proposals and attend all these high-level meetings where you're supposed to speak in English and things like that. So they then created a secretariat to serve the movement. So you have in ZimRights a hybrid approach. So you have a secretariat, which is a very professional group of a few experts located in 3 areas, headquartered here in Harare, where I'm from. And then you have one in Masvingo, one in Bulawayo, and we have local coordinators across the country. So that's a secretariat that was supposed to provide technical support to the movement, acknowledging that the movement sometimes needs expert intervention. Where does the conflict come in from? Where does the tension come in from? The tension comes in that many times when you have a structure like that, there is the seduction of over-professionalization. This is where, organizations like ZimRights think they find themselves having to compete with other civil society groups for funding. That is because our model is totally different. And before you know it, the Secretariat is slowly consuming the membership. How does that happen? It happens when the Secretariat begins to analyze calls that come from big funding partners, and there is nothing in there for the membership, but that's what funding partners need. So you end up having to shift the priorities of the organization so that you fit into the priorities of the funding partners. And if that happens over a long period of time, before you know it, you lose your movement. You look at it and you can't recognize it. And before you know it, the human rights programming is now only election-centered. And when we are looking at an election-centered programming, it's probably simply focusing on one aspect of election, abandoning all the other aspects, because that's what looks sexy to funding partners. How have we been trying to address that? There are a number of ways. One, we did introduce what we call the 8 action zone framework as part of the shifting power strategy. So in the action zone framework, we dismantle the work that we need to do around what we call arenas of action, because we're a movement, and the movement is like a bicycle. If a bicycle stops moving, it loses traction. If it loses traction, it loses balance. So it means there is need for action, which is designed in the action zones. But how do we arrive at these action zones? We went into about 219 communities that form ZimRights and asked a very simple question. When we talk about human rights, what do you hear? What do you care about? What is it that you want to, as an activist, you want to exhaust your energy in terms of human rights? And from there, we were able to come up with 8 action zones. And from there, we then designed a program to ensure that those action zones try to receive equal funding as much as possible. So that's one aspect of the shifting power to the strategy. An important aspect of the shifting power strategy, my colleagues spoke about money. Gertrude said, we realized that no matter how much we try to change these things, as long as money is flowing from one direction, it will be difficult to do so. So one of the key pillars that we then decided to invest on is achieving sustainability. Achieving sustainability. Our target under achieving sustainability is that at least 85% of the core operations funding of ZimRights should be funded by the members of ZimRights. This is not impossible. I just told you that we have about 250,000 members. It means if each of those members pays $1 in subscriptions per year, it means we have got a 250,000 grant that can run the core operations of the institution. But why have we failed to do that over the past 30 years? Because we never needed the money. The donors were there, so we didn't invest in the technology that allows us to collect subscriptions efficiently. We didn't invest in programming that allows us to motivate and mobilize our members to invest in this. In other words, we created a culture of receiving rather than a culture of giving. And I'm happy that the index that the CVA Institute has just released, they try to show how we can create that, build local philanthropy. Another aspect of our achieving sustainability pillar has been infrastructure development. So where I am seated here, this is ZimRights House. It's owned by the association. In the next few months, we will be hoping that we will have another development again in Masvingo province, where we are also able to own a property there. So we have launched what we're calling the Human Rights Village, which is a way of trying to create space that is owned by our members across all the provinces, so that the members are able to coordinate and organize. Zimbabwe is currently battling with what is called the PVO bill, the Private Voluntary Organizations Bill, which is now making it difficult for organizations like ours to organize. Because each time you go and you want venue, the owner of the venue is going to ask you for a memorandum of understanding with the local authority. And the local authority is afraid of giving you that MOU the moment you are branded that you are an enemy of the state. So what should people do? People should own the spaces that they need to organize and coordinate. And we already own this ZimRights House, and we believe it's impossible to duplicate this model across the country. And if we are able to do that per year, we will be able to add a minimum of $55,000 to our annual budget. Add that to the collection of the subscriptions, we should be able to fund not less than 85% of our core operations. But this is by no way meaning that, say, we want to chuck the donors out. The donors remain, but we want them to be active in our action zones. These are the areas where there are key priorities that they can identify with. But we need to be able to determine the sources of the funding for our own core operations so that we remain with that autonomy that we are speaking about. And so that the power, the real power in terms of money, is in the hands of the members, because all these resources that we are speaking about will be owned and are, as we speak, owned by the members. This place where I am sitting, ZimRights House, is owned by the members of ZimRights. So that's the story of the shifting power to the people at ZimRights.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I'm reflecting on what I'm hearing, and for me, the big kind of word, listening to the three of you tell your stories, I'm reflecting on the sense of balance that I'm hearing. I'm listening to three leaders tell the story of the work that you've done, your careers, your experience, and then your organizations. And as leaders, it's like there's two sides of your brain, which is, this is the mission, this is the work that we're doing, these are the people that we're working with. And then the operational aspects. How do I have the infrastructure? How do I balance the power? How do I make sure that there is enough funding and money coming in from the right sources to be resilient, adaptable, and sustainable? And I think this is what most leaders, both for national and international NGOs, are facing with all the time. So as we start to wrap up, I want to just pull a few threads, and then I have one final question for you all, a rapid response round. And what I've been hearing is we started by thinking about vision, 30 years. We talked about, oh, the dream. What is the dream 30 years from now? And the dream was getting rid of binary relationships, focusing on self-driven, a self-driven development sector where local communities are actively leading in the work, in identifying the needs, and in doing the work. And in order to get there, we've started to talk about, well, what does it mean from an operations perspective? What does it mean in terms of balancing the head and the heart, and in terms of having the art and the science of maintaining the vision and the direction that you're going in, but also recognizing the reality of power, funding, operations, infrastructure, et cetera. I think it's being able to bridge those tensions that many of which have been raised, that is going to get us to that long-term vision. And listening to your stories, I think certainly has shed some light onto what that might look like in practical terms. I've heard loud and clear the idea of let's move past the slogans and the jargon, and let's start moving from talking the talk to walking the walk. And that's going to include a combination of both mindset shifts at all levels, but also structural, practical shifts. So thank you for your contributions to that discussion and for being willing to kind of get into the nitty-gritty and move past the talk, if you will. My final question for you is rapid response round from each of you. If you had one call to action that needed to be heard from any stakeholder, your national NGOs, international NGOs, funders, local governments, communities you work with, what have you, what would your one call to action be? And let's go in the direction that I can see you all. So Dzikamai, Gertrude, and then Wadzanayi, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. So if I had one call to action, well, I've got many, but if I was to restrict myself to only one of them, coming from the Zimbabwean perspective, and the work that we're doing in Zimbabwe, and the challenges that we are facing within the context of laws that restrict civic space, that limit the participation of citizens, and the kind of fear that we are getting from many development partners, and the ongoing disinvestment in people movements. I would say people movements are the way to real equitable development. And the work that we are doing, and this is a serious plea, the work that we are doing, organizations like Gertrude's organization, Wadzanayi's organization, it's a non-violent approach to achieving the goals that everyone wishes for. If we were to lose this space, violent extremists would take over. Human rights work here in Zimbabwe and anywhere else on the continent is a liberation struggle, only that we choose to wage it without violence. That should be invested in. Disinvesting in people movements leads to elite capture, and elite capture can happen either by the state, but it can also happen even by development partners who feel they're doing the right thing, but investing it in the wrong way. So yeah, that's my call to action. Let's continue to support people movements, the real people movements.
So let's continue. But also let's continue coordination. I'm very much in admiration to what Dzikamai's organization is doing, coordinating and bringing in the thinking together, the thinkers together, and doing the work together. I think that's critical. So I would say coordination, let's improve, but also refining the agenda, continue to define it better so that we understand it, not just locally led abstract, but locally, what do we mean? Like fleshing out and giving it a face, a clear face. Thank you.
Thank you. So just adding on to what my colleagues have said, I think my call to action is centering people, collective care, and commitment. Centering people as in centering the people who are right within the communities and giving them topmost priority in all things. Collective care in terms of caring for people throughout the processes, the people, yes, in the communities, the people who are delivering support to the ideas from the communities, right across the value chain. And also commitment. It's a lifetime. People's lives are not projects, and I always say that to my team. When we work with people, it's their lives. They actually live in their lives, and we shouldn't come in and assume their life is a 5-year, 2-year, 3-year project. No, it's a life, and we should be able to commit ourselves for the long haul. So that's my call to action.
Thank you all. Thank you both so much for your time, for sharing your wisdom and your experiences. Thank you for those who have been on the call. I've dropped in some links for both some further research findings and reports from Humentum, as well as our continuation of this locally led development webinar series. We'll be back next month with some more discussions. I appreciate you all, and I wish you the best of luck. And I hope that you continue this relationship, and as you go forward, I can see I want to learn more and hear. I feel like there's case studies and blogs and all of what you are saying, so that we can learn more and dig deeper into what you are doing and how you are contributing to this movement. So thank you all very much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you at the next event.